Yuri specialized in helping companies to change their business models in such a way that they become more sustainable and more circular. Yuri is also the founding member of the Circular Business Academy, which is a program offering tailored professional training programs, enabling entrepreneurs, managers, and policymakers to embrace circular business model innovation. So Yuri will talk today about circularity assessment and circular business model transformation. Yuri, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to present at this second ERASME Circular Economy webinar. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much to Arnaud, to Edouard for this very kind introduction. Indeed, confirming just to add, I'm by profession, I'm an economist and who was further trained in business administration. The most of my career I've been professing. I've been serving as a manager who has turned in recent years into a consultant, researcher, investment manager at the same time. And circular economy has become my personal and also my team's key area of interest and research, but also, of course, engagement with our clients. I'm going to start sharing my screen in order to go into straight into the topic. This is one of my favorite views. I'm seated in Ljubljana, Slovenia. And this is a shot taken in the winter time from Mount Kanin, overlooking the easternmost part of the Alps, across the plain, the city of Trieste, and the beginnings of history into the Adriatic Sea. So this is a little bit where I think I belong, and it's also nice photo encouraging us to think about sustainability and our future and how much we are connected among each other. I wouldn't like to go in too much into introducing Circular Business Academy, which is of course our platform from which we also gather, exchange, and share the knowledge that I would also like to share today with you. So I'm going to leave you with this presentation. Of course, it's a network organization, and it is a part of our consultancy, briefly called GM. The questions that I would like to raise today are basically, first of all, I would like to open with a wider discussion about how the transition to the circular economy contributes to resolve the overall societal crisis of climate and resources. And I'll try to illustrate why I think it's really so hard to transit to circular business models. Circular business models are really in the center of our attention. What means that we are focused on working with companies, large, but particularly mid-sized and small companies, even startups, who, of course, are challenged to adapt their business models to seize circular opportunities. And I'll briefly present how the transformation process is typically run, what are its peculiarities, and what does it mean from the financing standpoint? Why it is sometimes very hard to justify a circular investment. From this definition of the circular economy, I really like to stress that we understand it as a system which is regenerative by design, and it requires or it relies on a system-wide innovation by which we can make, reducing the waste or designing it out, which is common challenge. So it's not just about what one company can do. It's a systemic question. But companies are challenged, and so we are going to gradually move into this perspective and examining it much closer. I would, in this first part, I'm going to spend a few words about how the circularity and circular economy contributes to our overall climate and resources crisis by introducing the term of decoupling. What, as we know, we are challenged to decouple the advancement of human well-being from the advancement of the economic activity, in the sense that we advance by diminishing the resource use and the environmental impact. So it means that companies, consumers, should actually leave a very different impact on each other and on the natural environment itself. However, things are going in a different direction. This is a rather complicated picture that shows that the likelihood and the impact of catastrophic or risk events. Insurance companies are particularly interested in this. As we see by looking at green, particularly green, but also red squares, the most likely and with the highest impact, events with the highest impact are actually those who are very closely related to the resource crisis and to the climate crisis, and these have been increasing. So it is a very important business topic, even though the world at the moment is predominantly linear. And as the economic growth advances, we go more linear, even though we are quite, I mean, at the global area, very aware that we are taking as a civilization sufficient risk. So there is a huge gap in what we would like to do and what we can would like to, and what we actually are doing, and what we can do at this very moment, because there is this systemic issue. So how to go out of this position? One of the critics of the most constructive critics that I found of the Paris Agreement and some early practices and solutions, like subsidizing solar panels, for example, is Björn Lomborg, who actually says any cent spent on innovation will return much better than subsidizing technologies that actually are not ready to help us get there. So innovation is, of course, the way to go. But for innovation, we need knowledge, we need research, we need entrepreneurs, we need companies, and we need markets, and from markets we need stable societies. When we talk about the contribution of the circular economy, according to this to Circular Economy, a Dutch consultancy, about a half, even though things are very interrelated, but we can say about a half of the contribution to a carbon neutral world should derive from circularity, from the transition to the circular economy, looking at the CO emissions here in particular, as in this cited from the Circularity Gap Report. The rest is, of course, is innovation more directly linked to new sources, renewable sources of energy, which don't necessarily require circular solutions as such. But why is it so hard? I mean, we know, and I'll show you later. We know that the world is actually still getting less and less circular. So why is it so hard to transit? First of all, because the circular transition is an evolutionary process, a multi-level transition, and it's about innovation, which is not equally spread around the world, and it requires the notion that there's the end of growth as we know it. Of course, we can still talk about growth, but we should measure different things. And we still measure wrong things. This scheme, circular economy, circular culture, circular transformation, we call it the circular triangle, is a simple thinking pattern that helps us understand that in order to progress in the circular transition, we need to take the systemic approach, or let's say the regulation, policies, global governance should help introduce better conditions and more favorable conditions to circular actors. Companies should be enabled to transform their organizations and business models. And this is the second angle, the circular transformation. While the third one, of course, is also a question of preferences, a question of values, a question of preferences of all of us as consumers, as citizens, as voters, as parents, and much more. This last one can be illustrated by a simple question. How can a beautiful blouse be really beautiful if it is produced in a non-sustainable way, and if there's no way I can assure its second life? Can this really be a beautiful blouse? So I promised I'll show you some figures about how circular the world is. I'm citing the circular economy and there's Circularity Gap reports. There have been 3 years in a row of this measurement. The first measurement returned that the world was 10% circular. We were getting down by some percentage points. So we got to 8.6 as it was presented in January 2020 at the Davos summit. In this year, some country reports were published for Austria, the Netherlands, and Norway, showing quite different results actually, but not so entirely surprising. Obviously, the Netherlands, according to this metrics, is almost 25% circular. Austria is doing slightly better than the world, while Norway, you can imagine why, is actually only 2.5% circular, and it's in spite of course, many things that are well known that Norway is doing, also the experimental level. I touched the regulatory framework. We know that the European Union is taking the lead in that, and we know that the European Green Deal is actually has laid ground for the new European Commission, and the circular economy is one of the imperatives there, and structural and financial instruments are in place and are ready to for these actions. And we also know that the way how the European Commission intends to lead the recovery of the post-pandemic recovery is linked to circular innovation. So this can be very relevant for companies. Back to the measurements. How are these? How can we actually define how circular an economy is? The first attempts were made by a group of mostly Austrian scientists led by Willi Hassel. I'm citing this article here, in which they tried to assess the level of circularity of the European economy by so they tried to understand how much of what is here in this model determined as stock of materials or resources can be actually recovered and reused instead of putting at a waste. And this is roughly the approach that also the circular that also circular economy is using for their metrics. What is in practical terms? What is important for this? It is important that we continue to advance in circularity. When we look at recycling, it's the lowest possible level, of course, of finding the second life for materials. If you think of incinerators, of course, this is finding the second life of some materials. Burning waste is better than not doing anything, but it's really destroying possibilities for all subsequent uses of these resources. So that's why, of course, it's important to redesign regenerative systems that can help keep resources in the loop and significantly diminish the need for virgin resources to be inputted in the value chains. So I'm going to go a little get back to the governments, and I'm not going to bother you with the Paris Agreement. I would just like to make one more reference here. I would like to invite you to follow and to contribute to the grassroots processes or bottom-up processes in making our systems as regenerative as possible at regional and national levels. This process is very well summarized in the German positioning document on the circular economy, and in which it analyzes all other countries that have been there maybe slightly before with their first roadmaps, and have been also analyzed in this document. And this has produced a significant impact on the policy making at various levels. So let's move now to the business models. In such an environment, we are looking for more companies to be circular. We can learn from circular frontrunners, like a company that I would like to briefly present you right now. It's called Aquafil. It's seated, as you see in the photo, it is seated among in the mountains. Actually, this is the northern part of Lake Garda. If I'm behind this rock, this town is called Arco, and behind this rock, Lake Garda extends down almost to Verona. And this company has always been seated here. It's present in several in 3 continents, in more than 10 countries around the globe. And they are a a nylon producer who, of course, always had to take care of their immediate environment. As you see, it is very fragile. There's a lot of agriculture. There's this huge lake, a huge water basin, an important tourist destination, and more than that. So they from in the 50s, in the 60s, they seemed to be almost penalized against other companies who didn't have to take so much care of that. But their journey started when they really carefully analyzed their sustainability records, and they started the change. The emphasis is that such a sustainability transformation takes some 15 years, and it has to be really demanded by top down, and this is a family-owned company, and the leadership was very explicit in this. So they are turning, granulate into nylon threads, out of which such materials are produced as carpets and clothing. And the increase of the nylon fiber actually exceeds the population growth in the world. This is a company of €500 million turnover, 8 countries, 3 continents, almost 3,000 employees in these many countries. With this concept, they managed to start recovering, first of all, internally, and then also externally, let's call it nylon, used nylon out of fishing nets, and they decided to recover it out of fishing nets, used carpets, used chairs, and some other furniture, etc. A whole new system was, a whole new technology was developed and put in place. First of all, in the plant that is actually seated right here in Ljubljana, and then it's now spread across the world into other plants, through this they have been engaging their suppliers, but also the buyers to add into their business model. The lesson here is twofold. First of all, a circular transformation normally takes a long time, and it requires a novel rethinking in terms of sustainability and the company's purpose. And secondly, in a new mindset, the company finds challenges to innovate. They innovated at the early part, especially the early part first, the early part of their value chain, and then and you can imagine that it was that going out of sourcing from the petrochemical industry into a number of cooperatives, waste management companies, was a huge transition. And now they are advancing their level of their contribution to circularity by, first of all, by moving this technology to other plants. Secondly, by moving also the sourcing across the world, because it's quite unsustainable if you want just to keep your circular plant in Ljubljana and then you source your fishing nets all around the world, who need to travel all around the world. But so they have been engaging their suppliers, but on the other hand, they are branding their nylon as Econyl, the nylon that is perfect. I mean, that has the same perfect characteristics as the conventional nylon. Many important brands, including Arena, Adidas, and other producers of clothing and sportswear are buying into this and proudly expose their brand on their clothes. So I think this is an interesting example of a circular company, of a circular frontrunner, whose possibilities were maybe more favorable than of many others, because the regulation was slightly more favorable. Because at some point in time, fishing families were impeded to, to continue dropping the fishing nets, used fishing nets down to the sea bottoms, and some material started to pile up, and somebody needed to do something out of it. I will skip some of these, some of the story of Aquafil for your own reference, to conclude that it's a long journey. It takes, and many companies start their journey by just complying with legislation or labor conditions, later cost reduction, and some further they want to meet some further challenges in terms of unidimensional eco-efficiency before going into the value dimension and innovate at the level of products, business models, and at the very end, I hope you can see this because I cannot. Of course, the system focus means being a part of a regenerative system. And I think Aquafil is an example of such a frontrunner that has made it all the way. But many companies cannot do it so easily because they because the competition at the regulatory level between linear and circular thinkers is still unfair. So we have inefficient systemic initiatives, but also insufficient knowledge and a record to carry out transformations, evaluate investment opportunities, realize meaningful innovations, and incubate new firms. So there's a huge array of untapped opportunities here, but many more things need to be done. So how can we actually help and entrepreneurs, investors, and facilitate this transition? I'll just indicate some of the references. When we go into the circular business models now, there are two interesting, I would say, classifications of generic circular business models. One was brought by Peter Lacey and Jakob Rudquist in this book, Waste to Wealth, published by Accenture in 2015. They outline five generic models that do interesting things in terms of increasing circularity along an industrial value chain. This is maybe a better picture. We are talking about circular surprise, resource recovery, product life cycle extension, sharing platforms, and product as a service as five, typical generic models. And they do either, they close the loops, or they slow loops, or they narrow the loops, as we like to say. So this means either they contribute to savings, or they contribute to the durability, or they contribute to the recovery of resources after the product life has come to an end. This is just another nice way to align them. And there are, of course, a number of examples from Patagonia to Aquafil, product as a service in many ways. Just think of a Fairphone and so on. Here's some more reference. Probably one of the most daring examples of product to service transformation has been going on by Philips. Some great examples of recovery of used products is well known in the automotive industry, or by tire producers like Michelin, and so forth. The other approach was developed by a group of finance experts. They had taken into account Lacey and Lundquist typology, but they wanted to understand how to manage risks, because risk management, of course, is in the bottom of every investor's or every bank's strategy. So they tried to go. They tried to understand these business models from the point of view of financing needs, longevity, liquidity, and such things. And they basically said, yeah, there are actually three types of business models. One group is the one that concerns innovations in the early stage of a value chain, and there are somewhat different names, but later Nancy Balkan and some other authors published an article in which they presented the so-called value hill, and the picture you see on the left is the one. So they simplified also the names, and this first group is circular design models. In the middle of the value chain, where we are, when we engage with finished products, we engaged or services, we engage with customers, of course. There we can do a lot with product to service models, particularly to optimize the use and extend the life cycle, or increase the efficiency, so that, for example, cars are not only 8% used and the rest they are left idle on the parking lot, but they are shared. And when it comes to the end of the life cycle, and when we move towards the final stages of the value chain, of course, there are innovations needed and related to assuring the next life. So it's about dismantling, it's about designing to products in such a way that dismantling the solution is simpler, and that these materials can be actually reused. Needless to say that 4.0 technologies help a lot. For example, some 20% of circularity can derive from construction industry, and by digitalization we could have catalogs of materials of all construction all construction stock in our cities, and we could actually plan when these materials and how these materials could be reused or refurbished in the most useful way. So these guys, they gathered within Ellen MacArthur, and at the beginning they shared a lot of knowledge, but then of course now in more mature stages, banks and investors try to develop their own models, so they kind of keep these things as business secrets. They defined two dimensions of risk. One is circular risk, and the other one is linear risk. Some risk managers consider these as two new components of risk, along with credit risk, market risk, you name it, political risk. But it should be, in my view, it should be regarded more like aspects that change all other risk dimensions. Many of them are, or almost all, of course, are tied to how strong we are, and what is the type and content of the relationship with other actors in the value chain. So circular risks, of course, are those connected with the unknowns in transiting to circular models. linear risk are those that we are mostly not aware of, and banks are not aware of when they analyze projects they would like to finance. But many times these are underestimated, and the circular risks are on the other hand overestimated, and that's why there's a bias in the financing market that still does not recognize circular opportunities equally well. How does a business model transformation process run? And here I'm going to show you also this circularity assessment model that we developed with one of the banks. Of course, we all know the business model canvas that is used that helps us understand a firm's business model. There are 7 questions, some fundamental questions that we can raise when we go into the practical analysis and try to understand in what ways we can improve, or where the opportunities of circularity. This is of course just the new narrative brought over from the value chain perspective that we discussed before. And if we want to change the business, I mean, if we want to have a circular answer to these 7 questions, we normally go like this. We try to help, we try to assist companies to start experimenting. There's almost never there's a case, you know, when there's a fully informed decision that yes, we are now going circular and that's it, and we are going to work on this for 15 years and we will be as good as Aquafil. There's always, you know, a stop and go. There's always the question of whether we can go one level more or not, and how do we do that? For the first set of the first horizon is about changing the perspective on our vision and purpose, and for this, of course, we need leadership. The next horizon is about selecting a challenge. It's about a pilot project. Any company has got many development projects, but if there's a project that we consciously choose because of its characteristics to be our circular playground, this means that we will tackle it differently, that we will dedicate resources to which will fully exploit the circular potential of this project, but also the learnings that we can take away and use further in the subsequent steps in our transformations. So then, of course, we need to schedule a system and include partners into this, and then carry out internal transformation and external transformation, of course, in parallel. And on the right hand side, you just have an adapted canvas with some where, of course, the value proposition is broken down into the 3 aspects of sustainability, which is a good starting point for visioning and for reassessing our purpose. So there's, yeah. So this is how we help them transit. This is how Aquafil has done it. But there are many good companies that have been well engaged in this. And here I would like now to go into a little bit more into how we can, as let's say, as circular entrepreneurs, how we can get financing, how we can persuade investors, how we can actually implement our ambitions. Those guys that I talked about before, that actually understood the 3 different risk profiles of circular business models, They further engage with many other finance experts at the EU level, where the new landscape is being shaped that will bring all financial intermediaries to the same level and would eliminate the bias, the systemic bias in which financial institutions right now are still caught. And because of that, they simply are impeded or inhibited to finance circular projects more. The European Investment Bank Group is the market maker in this process. So we know that every company goes through its own life cycle. At the beginning, startups rely on grant subsidies, crowdfunding, family, friends, and fools, some people say. Then they go further through venture capital or seed capital to private equity, and at a certain point they become eligible also for banks. Sometimes they go public, and sometimes later on they become also financed by pension funds and other institutional investors. And currently, just to summarize, I'm now, because I'm being a bit long, I'm going to skip this slide just to say that here this current situation is well described, and so banks are actually changing. Banks are working on their risk assessment models. And they try to integrate circular-related risks into banks' capital requirements. What means that if you grant a loan to a circular company, you will not sacrifice so much of your capital requirements as it is currently needed, and that will, of course, improve the position. So how do front runners among banks tackle? How do they learn? Because this is a scheme of Intesa Sanpaolo's approach. They call it circular economy standard. They have their own scoring model, and they have their own group of companies that they observe, that they recognize as circular frontrunners, and they grant them loans, and then they observe what happens, and they of course organize courses for them and so on. So this is their circular champions community. Their own scoring model assesses the degree of circularity and the current circularity and the propensity to further invest in the circular economy of these circular front runners. And this is just a screenshot of how their assessment looks like. When we were asked some 3 years ago by the Slovenian Development Bank, which is actually it's an important systemic institution, but it's not a big bank. We were asked to help them design some kind of a scoring model, so they would actually be able to finance up to the exhaustion of their capital requirements, so that they would be able to finance more aggressively circular projects. We came up with this solution, which was then also implemented in their practice, and this is the circularity assessment score that we are now further working on it, and we have used it in several consulting projects, and it's also being used in some early innovation projects, like, for example, right now there's a Circular 4.0 Interreg project that will involve more than 250 companies from the alpine space in these SMEs in this circular transition. We said, okay, first of all, it's important to understand that how can we understand, well, what is a circular company? Before we discussed what is how much circular are some national economies or the global economy as a whole. But the circular company should be the one that contributes and is circular to the extent to which it contributes to the circularity of an economy as such, right? In which it operates to the global economy effectively. So we know how we know that if we can know how much we can assess its ability, its potential, and its actual degree of performance of their business models. If we really analyze what they do and going across their value chain, and this is a little bit the approach that we have chosen. So on one hand, we try to assess the business model potential of their target business model, and this is something very interesting for banks because they always look back, they always look figures that were realized in the past. Then they look a little bit to the economic forecasts, and then that's it. The business model that a company pursues may not be fully in place, but in its maximum extent, it can have a good or not so good circular potential, right? And this is what we try to assess by going through a substantial questionnaire across all stages of the value chain. But then there's a question whether this company is capable of exploiting this potential. And this depends on managerial practices that are in place and currently or have been committed. This is a little bit the approach that we have. So it's we are using this model at various degrees of complexity. A very simple one is freely available from our website, so you can try it out. It's 20 questions. It will not take you very much. You can assess your own company or the company that you know very well, and you will get a short report. And but the bank uses a much more complex method, which has then several corrective factors in the second run. So it's actually a little bit more of a in-depth analysis of a company from the circularity perspective. So just to repeat, we try to analyze the value chain to understand the circularity potential. And we tie our analysis to the typology of the three business models so that this can be translated into their risk profiles. And we analyze the commitment to circular transformation by analyzing these 5 components. Whether the circular objectives are clear, whether this is a part of the planning process, whether people are dedicated to circular transformation with clear accountability, award system. Do they have are they awarded and incentivized to do this, or is this just something on top? Has the organization been adapting to new findings? Is the organization capable of collaboration? And what kind of capabilities there actually are? But it's also about values just as much as capabilities. Has there been a budget allocated, and how all this is monitored and reported? So basically, you get a score, one figure that is a composed, a sum of 2 partial scores, circularity potential and circularity commitment, that aligns you among these 4 quadrants. Managers really like matrices that only have 4 quadrants, so that's why we want to have something simple. And of course, after 2 years of practicing, the Slovenian Development Bank says that among their clients there are some 25% that well, along the time it was a little more, but it's still roughly over 23% of clients who who line themselves among circular front runners. If a company is here, what this means that, of course, they have quite some potential, but they need to improve the commitment. If the company is here, this means that they are quite committed, but they have an impossible business model, so they have to get out of the trap. And of course, if they are very close to with a very close figure, then they have to really rethink, because they are really risking high. This is a copy of a report that they can get. Thank you. I know I was a little bit long. I apologize for that. And I thank you for your attention. And I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going I will gladly reply any questions that you have, or any remarks, any comments, please.
Thank you so much, Jurij. It's very insightful to see circular economy really from the perspective of practitioners in the field, such as yourself, especially considering your robust hands-on experience working with businesses and entrepreneurs. There is one question from Arno, and he says, after reading the guidelines of the Green Deal, it seems that the European Commission is really concerned with sectors and value of the supply chain, but not with business models of the circular economy. What is your opinion on this?
I think that I think that this is all. This all has to emerge. I'm going to reply with this concrete example. Right now, I'm working with 11 partners as one of the experts in this Interreg project, which is quite ambitious, and it's titled Circular 4.0. So it actually combines circular business models with new technologies, and the goal is to prepare ground to help 260 companies from the Alpine space, because it's the Alpine space Interreg, transit, to a circular business model. And the weight point is in this scheme of the three, of the value wheel, and the three types of business models which we are identifying with the pilot companies, and we try to build a support system around them to help them go on. And the Commission has been observing this project. Is still quite in an early stage, but there's regular reporting foreseen down the road, right? Because the learnings can be soon transferred to other fields. So I think this is emerging, but it is not as easy, because a business model is an intellectual construct. It's something very soft. We still need to make a catalog of where we are. Just as much as with anything else. For example, banks, the banking system and the financial intermediaries started with the taxonomy, because there was so much, there were so many expressions used and abused, also in terms of greenwashing, and the first layer for the banking system to agree on what is sustainable financing, what is circular financing, was to align and agree on the terminology. So I think this goes a little bit in the same direction. So we need to understand where we are, what are the problems of SMEs, what type of business models they are actually pursuing, what are their challenges, and where are the gaps. And I don't have the feeling that this is being neglected, but I am aware that it's, that is a process that is that has departed. So I'm optimistic from this point of view, but I'm also aware that we will have, only, more practical results in 2-3 years at the wider scale. As I have demonstrated, banks like Intesa San Paolo or ING or Rabo and certainly EBRD, I mean, so systemic institutions, and in the first place, European Investment Bank are accumulating early practices and are very aware of their responsibility to accelerate financing into the circular economy. And you know what, investors, investors, either, you know, institutional investors or those engaged in the capital markets, or, you know, VCs, private equity, and even business angels, they recognize the resilience of companies that are committed to circular transformation. And just look at this very challenging times. Right now, resilience is at the test, and I'm convinced, and this is the evidence that I've been trying to also accumulate and understand, that more sustainable companies, and within this large group also those who are innovative in circular terms, those who are engaged with circular innovation, are actually much more resilient. So in bad times, it's important not to default. And these companies, this is proven already, they don't default as easily. So this evidence has been accumulating also from this point of view.
And coming back to your hands-on work with the companies, when you started your consultancy and later on the Circular Business Academy program, which were the biggest obstacles you had to overcome in relation to the audience you were targeting, considering you were coming with terms such as innovation, circularity, resilience, and would you say that the situation has changed in recent years?
I think that yes, I think that the situation has changed a lot, and has been improving in terms of understanding and engagement. Myself, when my last corporate job was actually in a bank that was in a dire restructuring after the last financial crisis. So when I was a victim of that mentality, and when I started to understand, to engage with circularity, I had to undergo a lot of questions myself, and I had to consciously make this shift from the past to what I think is the future for all of us. So many people, more of us, I think, need to do this. And the obstacles, the major obstacle is, of course, the fact that many, not just, practitioners or common people, but also experts, researchers, people from the academia, they are still caught into the patterns, into the theories even, that consider challenges, circular challenges, just one subject of sustainability, which is just some kind of a cost item, a burden. So I think this is the major problem. If you approach a company and you tell them a big story, then they of course want to know what is it. How you can resolve their problem at that very moment. And most probably there won't be a quick solution. But those who start, and because you need, if you want to go there, you need to start rethinking your purpose. You need to start rethinking what will happen. 2 days ago, we had such a meeting with a very well organized, profitable family company with 150 employees. They are supplier to automotive industry, up to 90%. They do plastic parts of cars and wires, and they are an excellent company, and they do exactly what their buyers require, and they get the specification, and they are a high quality company with all possible ISO standards and others. So their problem at the moment may not be circularity, but then we discussed what would happen when cars would go electric. I mean, all the cars, when we see this from one day to another. And because not just that the internal combustion engine flies out, it's also that chairs change, doors change. Electric cars will have a great effect on circularity because they have a potential to you know, the durability is way extended over today's 8-9 years that as it is perceived for let's say the old cars. We could have electric cars, you know, that last 25 years. So everything has to be redesigned, even the plastics. Or maybe there won't be any plastics, or maybe there will some other requirements will come, and then, you know, and they will have obsolete machines from one day to another. So in some way, this transition is very dependent on large companies because they give the pace to the economy, and we need to support even more the SMEs who are dependent, who are successful SMEs are networked with large companies. And that's why they need to have the lighthouse, and this is where we can help them substantially. So the barriers are caught into the old patterns and understanding circularity as a cost, and also sometimes not understanding fully all this new terminology. Many times people say sustainability, they say circularity, and they don't distinguish so well between these two things. And also, they need to distinguish between what is a strategy and what is a business model, and so on. So these are the typical fallacies that we encounter on our way.
Just thank you, Jurij, for this presentation. I think it's really introduced a big question about the business model today. So I just want to remind everyone that the next webinar will be October 8, 1 to 2 p.m. And we just have Paul James talking about circular economy for the city.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone. I hope to see you for the next webinar, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.